The Springfield M1903A4 was a work of art. Hand-fitted stocks, match-grade barrels, scope mounts machined to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. American snipers had carried variations of the Springfield for 30 years, trusting the bolt-action precision that had proven itself in every conflict since the trenches of 1918. The M1C Garand was not a work of art. It was a standard infantry rifle with a scope bolted awkwardly to the side, the optical sight mounted left of center to clear the clip that ejected from the top of the receiver. The offset made the weapon ungainly. The semi-automatic action introduced variables that bolt-action purists considered unacceptable. The scope itself rattled loose after sustained firing. The Army's senior snipers called it the plumber's nightmare. They said it looked like someone had welded a telescope to a gas pipe. They said any sniper who trusted his life to a semi-automatic mechanism in combat was asking to die with a jammed rifle in his hands. Sergeant Thomas Miller had heard all of this. He had been trained on the Springfield. He had qualified as an expert marksman with the bolt action. He understood why the old guard despised the M1C with such passion. On October 18, 1944, in the burning ruins of Aachen, he was about to prove them catastrophically wrong. Aachen was the first German city to fall to American forces. The Wehrmacht had decided to make the Allies pay for every block. The fighting was room to room, building to building, a nightmare of collapsed structures and hidden firing positions that favored defenders and slaughtered attackers. American casualties mounted daily as German soldiers fought with the desperation of men defending their homeland. The traditional rules of sniping didn't apply in Aachen. A sniper needed distance. A sniper needed time. A sniper needed the luxury of careful aim and considered shots. In the rubble of a German city, none of those conditions existed. Miller's squad was pinned in the basement of a bombed-out apartment building. They had been moving toward an objective 3 blocks north when a German machine gun opened up from a second-floor window across the street. The burst had killed 2 men before anyone could react. Now the survivors were trapped, unable to advance or retreat without crossing the machine gun's field of fire. Miller crawled to a shattered window that offered a partial view of the German position. He could see the muzzle flash when the MG-42 fired, but the gunner was concealed behind rubble that would stop any round he could throw at it. A conventional sniper shot was impossible. Then he saw the German patrol. 5 soldiers were moving through the debris on the ground floor of the building opposite. They were working toward a flanking position that would give them angles into the American basement. In 30 seconds, they would be able to drop grenades directly onto Miller's squad. Miller had the Springfield slung across his back. It was his primary weapon, the rifle he had trained with, the rifle that every instructor had told him was the only acceptable tool for a sniper. He could unsling it, chamber a round, acquire a target, and fire in approximately 4 seconds. In 4 seconds, the German patrol would reach cover. He reached for the M1C instead. The scope was already zeroed. The chamber was already loaded. His finger found the trigger, and he acquired the lead soldier through the offset optics that everyone said made accurate shooting impossible. He fired. The first round struck the lead soldier in the chest. Miller's finger was already releasing the trigger and pulling again. The semi-automatic action cycled, ejecting the spent casing and chambering the next round faster than any human hand could work a bolt. The second round hit the soldier behind the lead. He had turned toward the sound of the shot, presenting a larger target, dying before he completed the motion. The third round caught the third soldier as he was reaching for his weapon. He dropped without firing a shot. 3 seconds. 3 shots. 3 kills. The remaining 2 Germans dove for cover, but they were disoriented, terrified by the impossibility of what had just happened. 3 of their comrades had died in the time it took to draw a breath. They didn't know where the fire was coming from. They didn't know how many shooters they faced. Miller fired twice more. The 4th round missed as 1 German scrambled behind a pile of bricks. The 5th round didn't miss. The last survivor broke and ran, abandoning his position, fleeing into the rubble. The flanking maneuver had been stopped. 5 seconds, 5 rounds, 4 kills. Miller looked at the M1C in his hands, the ugly, awkward, offset-scoped rifle that everyone said couldn't work in combat had just saved his entire squad. The traditional sniper doctrine was built around a simple assumption: accuracy mattered more than speed. A sniper was a precision instrument, not a volume weapon. One shot, one kill. Take your time. Make it count. The bolt action enforced this discipline. You couldn't rush shots when you had to manually cycle the weapon between each round. But the doctrine had been written for a different kind of war. In the trenches of 1918, snipers engaged targets across no man's land at ranges of hundreds of yards. They had time to observe, calculate, and shoot. The enemy was static, pinned in place by the stalemate of trench warfare. A sniper's job was to pick off individuals with deliberate, aimed fire. In the urban combat of 1944, nothing was static. Enemies appeared and disappeared in seconds. Targets moved across open spaces and vanished into buildings. The luxury of careful aim was a fantasy. By the time a bolt-action sniper had worked his action for a follow-up shot, the target was gone. The M1C changed the equation. The semi-automatic action allowed a trained shooter to engage multiple targets before they could react. The 8-round capacity meant sustained engagements without the vulnerability of reloading. The speed of the system turned a sniper from a precision asset into an area denial weapon. The offset scope that everyone mocked was actually an adaptation that solved a legitimate engineering problem. The M1C Garand ejected its clip through the top of the receiver, throwing brass and steel directly into the path where a centered scope would need to be mounted. By offsetting the scope to the left, the designers maintained the rifle's full functionality while adding magnified optics. Yes, it was awkward. Yes, it required adjustment. Yes, it looked like a plumber's nightmare. But it worked. In the chaos of Aken, it worked better than the elegant Springfield that couldn't keep up with the speed of urban combat. Miller spent the next 3 weeks demonstrating this reality to anyone who questioned his weapon choice. He engaged German snipers in counter-sniper duels and won because he could fire follow-up shots faster than his opponents could work their bolts. He cleared rooms with aimed semi-automatic fire that dropped multiple enemies before they could organize resistance. He provided covering fire that kept his squad alive through engagements that would have overwhelmed a bolt-action shooter. The kill count mounted. Not single, carefully aimed shots at extreme range. Rapid, accurate fire at combat distances that the traditional sniper doctrine didn't acknowledge. The other snipers in his unit began to notice. The men who had mocked the M1C started asking questions. They watched Miller work and saw something that contradicted everything they had been taught. They saw a sniper who could engage multiple targets in the time it took a bolt-action shooter to cycle his weapon once. They saw a marksman who could adapt to the fluid chaos of urban combat instead of waiting for perfect conditions that never came. They saw the future of the sniper role, even if they didn't have a name for it yet. The concept that Miller demonstrated in Aachen would eventually be called the designated marksman rifle. Modern military doctrine distinguishes between snipers and designated marksmen. Snipers are specialists, operating at extreme ranges with bolt-action precision rifles, taking single shots that require extensive calculation and preparation. Designated marksmen are integrated into infantry squads, carrying semi-automatic rifles with magnified optics, providing accurate fire at intermediate ranges where standard infantry weapons lose effectiveness. Every modern military uses designated marksmen. The United States Army issues the M1110 semi-automatic sniper system. The Marines use the M39 enhanced marksman rifle. The concept is so fundamental to modern infantry tactics that it's difficult to imagine warfare without it. But in 1944, the concept didn't exist. The Army had snipers with bolt-action rifles and infantry with standard M1C Garands. There was nothing in between. The M1C was an attempt to bridge that gap, and the traditional snipers despised it because it violated everything they believed about their craft. Miller didn't care about traditions. He cared about keeping his squad alive. The engagement that cemented his reputation happened in late October. His squad was moving through a section of Aken that had been cleared twice and infiltrated twice by German forces. The enemy had learned to exploit the gaps between American patrols. sending small teams to reoccupy positions after the main force passed. Miller was on point when he spotted movement in a bombed-out church. 3 German soldiers were setting up a machine gun position in the bell tower, preparing to ambush the American patrol from an elevated angle. The range was approximately 200 yards. The targets were partially concealed by the remains of the tower walls. A bolt-action sniper would take the shot, cycle his weapon, and hope the remaining Germans didn't reach cover before he could fire again. Miller didn't hope. He calculated. First shot, the soldier handling the machine gun. He was the immediate threat. Second shot, the soldier feeding ammunition. He was the next priority. Third shot, the observer with binoculars. He was the command element. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. 3 aimed shots through magnified optics at 200 yards while standing exposed on a rubble-strewn street. The M1C's action cycled between each shot without Miller's hands leaving their firing position. The follow-up shots were on target before the Germans understood they were under attack. The church tower was silent. The ambush was neutralized. The patrol continued. Miller's lieutenant wrote the engagement into his after-action report. The report went up the chain of command, joining dozens of similar reports from units across the European theater. Officers who had dismissed the M1C as a failed experiment began reconsidering their assumptions. The data was clear. In urban combat, in close terrain, in any environment where targets appeared and disappeared rapidly, the semi-automatic sniper rifle outperformed the traditional bolt action. The speed advantage was not theoretical. It was measured in German bodies. The Army never formally acknowledged this revolution during the war. The Springfield remained the official sniper rifle, and the M1C remained the ugly stepchild that purists refused to accept. But the soldiers who used both weapons knew the truth. Miller finished the war with 47 confirmed kills, an extraordinary number for a marksman who had spent most of his combat time in urban environments where engagement distances rarely exceeded 300 yards. He never received the recognition that long-range snipers earned for kills at 600 or 800 yards. His shots were closer, faster, and somehow less prestigious in the eyes of men who measured skill by distance rather than effectiveness. After the war, Miller returned to civilian life and never spoke much about his service. The M1C he had carried through Aachen was turned in with his other equipment, probably scrapped or forgotten in some arsenal warehouse. The plumber's nightmare that had saved his squad and killed 47 Germans became a footnote in weapons development history. But the idea survived. When the United States developed the M21 sniper weapon system in the 1960s, they built it on a semi-automatic platform. When they created the M110 in the 2000s, they chose semi-automatic again. The designated marksman concept that Miller had demonstrated in Aken became standard doctrine in every modern military. The traditional snipers had been right about some things. Bolt-action rifles were more accurate at extreme ranges. They were simpler, more reliable, less prone to the complications of gas-operated systems. For the specific task of engaging single targets at maximum distance, the Springfield was superior. But warfare didn't always provide the luxury of single targets at maximum distance. Sometimes the enemy came in groups. Sometimes they moved fast. Sometimes the sniper who couldn't fire a rapid second shot was the sniper who died. The M1C was the first serious attempt to solve this problem. It was ugly. It was awkward. It was everything the purists hated. And it worked when the elegant solutions failed. 3 shots in 3 seconds. The speed that saved a patrol in Aachen. The demonstration that accurate volume of fire mattered as much as perfect single-shot precision. The proof that sometimes the mocked weapon is the weapon that actually solves the problem. The modern designated marksman carries a rifle that would look familiar to Sergeant Miller. Semi-automatic action. Magnified optics. 8 to 20 rounds available without reloading. The ability to engage multiple targets in rapid succession while maintaining the accuracy that distinguishes a marksman from a rifleman. They call it doctrine now. They teach it in every military school. They issue the weapons and train the soldiers and never mention the men who figured it out in the rubble of German cities, while the experts laughed at their ugly rifles. Miller didn't invent the concept. He demonstrated it. He proved it under fire when proving it meant betting his life on a weapon everyone said was a failure. He took the plumber's nightmare into combat and showed that sometimes the nightmare belongs to the enemy. The old snipers measured skill in distance. Miller measured skill in results. 3 targets in 3 seconds wasn't elegant. It wasn't traditional. It wasn't what the manual said a sniper should do. It was what the situation required. And the M1C delivered when nothing else could. If Miller's story of semi-auto vindication hit you the way it hit me, smash that like button right now. Every like tells the algorithm that soldiers who proved the experts wrong deserve to be remembered. If you're not subscribed, now is the time, because next week we're uncovering another mocked weapon that revolutionized combat doctrine. Drop a comment and answer honestly. If you were pinned down with enemies closing in, would you trust the elegant bolt action or the ugly semi-auto that could fire 3 times in 3 seconds? I want to know. I'll see you in the next one.